This is Chadillac, and you're with the Cage Rage podcast. We're here with Devin Miller, fight analyst, and Miguel and Devin, archivist and fight analyst for MMA and boxing. We're here today to talk about what was UFC 232, which is now ESPN Plus One. The first joining of the UFC and ESPN. We're pretty excited about it. There's a big fight with Henry and TJ. But first, we're going to talk about Bellator real quickly. Guys, tell me about The Last Emperor and Bader. What's going on with Darth Bader and The Last Emperor? Talk real quickly about that one for me.
Well, Bellator is coming to bat on the 26th of January with the finals of their heavyweight Grand Prix, and we got Ryan Bader and Fedor. Kind of, probably a swan song for Fedor. He's going to walk into the fight an underdog, but we get the finals, and, Fedor, many people's opinions, including my own, at one point was the best fighter on the planet. Now they're better fighters, but, you're talking about a GOAT candidate.
And he's the underdog in this fight. Devin, how do you feel about The Last Emperor, the GOAT in many people's eyes at heavyweight, being an underdog now? Does that kind of leave a little bit of a starch in your undies?
Well, I think it's warranted for this fight, but when it comes to what do I feel about Fedor? Me and you have talked about how the UFC in America has become synonymous with MMA. Well, during the rise of the Ultimate Fighter, when there was a lot of new fans coming to understand MMA, and the UFC's audience was growing, people started getting online and looking up, information about MMA, and they discovered Pride in Japan and started realizing that, most of the best fighters in the world were over in Japan. And the one fighter that really stuck out, and I remember being 16 years old, that just stuck out, and I instantly believed this was the best fighter in the world, was Fedor.
Yeah.
And I remember just watching him fight Crow Cop in the Nogueira fights, and his being suplexed on his neck by Kevin Randleman, and it was just so many different great moments that Fedor gave us. And he was the first guy that you saw just transitioning from grappling to striking. I mean, no technique, like not your traditional technique, winging shots from the hip, but it was just straightforward. He would throw a wild right hook, go into the clinch, take you down, pass your guard, beat you up, Kimura you. I mean, he was the whole package. He was amazing. And I agree with Miguel. I think this is kind of like his swan song, his going away party, and I hope he can pull it off. I don't think he will, but I hope he gets it done.
Yeah, Miguel, I know you've got 1,000 Fedor stories because you personally knew Fedor, or at least you have personally been around Fedor. I have a little, you have a great deal, and you work with him on a professional level a great deal. Anything you've got to add to that, kind of on a sort of, hey Fedor, we love you kind of way, send out thing?
You know what? Yeah, I do, and I do love Fedor, and I think he's a historic figure, and he deserves all the accolades. The thing to me is this: is fighting and sports in general. Fighting is very much a window in time. It's like, you might have a guy who might be the best fighter in the world for 100 days, but then something happens or there's a change. So it's a very fickle sport. And Fedor dominated pretty much for a good long time, which shows, all the factors that you want in an all-time great, right? Like durability and, like Devin pointed out, like just the diversity of attack. Just what I think was his most interesting point was how fucking cool he was in a fight, It's like that ability to not look disturbed or not be, I guess the best example of it on video that you can see is actually Fedor's brother. But watch Fedor's brother against, I forget the guy's first name, Thompson, the big gigantic muscle. Watch the differences in their body language. Like Alexander's sitting there in the corner, and he's literally just cleaning his nose out and standing there, and the other guy's like, and he kills him in like a minute, So it's like just that ability to be cool before a fight, I think, was one of the greatest things that you could take from Fedor, and just like in his diversity of attack. In this fight, I do think it's a tall order. I think he's gonna have a shot early because he's gonna still be fresh and he's still shown that he can punch in his old age. You know what I mean? So maybe he takes Bader out with a big punch. You know, a lucky punch kind of thing. With Fedor, you couldn't call it luck, I guess. You know, but I think that might be his best shot because other than that, he's fighting a guy younger, bigger, stronger, and you know who's at this point probably is technically sharp and you know as you're going to get. So I don't know. He's facing a pretty tall order here.
Well, look, guys, you're the analysts here and you're the experts, but I'm going to go out on a limb just for the hell of it and because I love Fedor so much. And I'm going to say that Fedor is going to win this by armbar. How do you like that one? How do you like those apples? Anything else, Devin, before we push on?
There is one thing I want to cover about this card. You know, me and you have talked off air, Chad, about you know about that idea that MMA is synonymous in America with the UFC and what Bellator and ONE have to do to actually become competitive. And in the modern, you know, when you look at this card with Bellator in modern perspective, it's continuing to show the point that I've been having that I don't know who their marketing strategist is, but it makes no sense. They bring in these guys who were Brian Bader's I think a top 5 light heavyweight in the world, but he was a guy who got beat by Rumble Johnson, got destroyed by John Jones. He had an up and down UFC career. They bring him in, they market him as a world beater, and they're bringing in Fedor, who's definitely on his way out and not one of the top 10 heavyweights, and they're marketing this as their big headline fight. And there's nobody that knows Bellator that doesn't know the UFC. So they see this and they just immediately think, you know, second-class promotion.
Yeah.
And I think Bellator really needs to do better at developing new talent and having new contenders like Strikeforce did, where there was actually like this dream of a crossover title fight versus title fight with the UFC. You have some of that in Bellator with like Rory McDonald and Gegard Mousasi, but you don't have it in this fight. And you've got their light heavyweight champ going up to heavyweight and probably going to be a 2-division champion over there. But this is a guy who, you know, would struggle and remain being top 5 in the UFC, and even casual fans know that. And that's why Bellator is struggling to actually be a worthy competitor with the UFC right now.
Yeah, I don't see Bellator ever being able to pick it up and be what the UFC is. But then let's face it, I don't see anyone. You know, I always compare the UFC to the NFL. The NFL is American football. The UFC is MMA, as far as most people are concerned. They don't say we're going to watch MMA. They say we're going to watch UFC. Did you have something to add to that, Miguel? I'm sorry I cut you off there.
No. So I was just going to mention Bellator from the very start was a failed project, and you know it because the bottom line is and one. I mean, I don't know that market as well. Obviously, I can't speak to exactly how they market, but they, to me, have the same flaw, and that is this: the UFC has their own schedule. They make their schedule, and it's well advanced, and we know 3 months, 10 cards of what the UFC has coming up. And you know what? The UFC, if it doesn't fit in the pay-per-view, they get it on Fox. If it doesn't fit on Fox, they put it on their thing. They do their schedule. Bellator is tied to whatever Spike TV gave them, which was a seasonal show. So it would actually shut down for several months. You can't have a fight promotion that way. The fighters need a schedule for them. So unless they're going to be either diversified or accepted on TV or Viacom or wherever they are now. Right now, their schedule is a joke. Because, you know, beyond the 2 shows we have, there's nothing planned. I mean, I'm sure they're in the boardrooms they're planned, but they have no marketing or anything planned like that. And the very fact is they've you know, in January, the UFC is going to ramp up here, and all of a sudden we're going to have weekly shows from them again. Meanwhile, we get Bader, then we get a follow-up card, and then we get probably a month and a half of nothing from Bellator. So until they have their schedule not married to a TV company, and that it makes all the decisions and it's looked at as a sport, then they're dead in the water. They'll never compete.
Yeah. So here's kind of what I see happening.
Then there's years of doing it the right way to even try to catch up. So they're so far behind because they decided to go and pursue fights like Ken Shamrock. You know.
Yeah. So here's what I see happening with Bellator. I think they're in a situation now where they have to have a real war chest behind them. They have to find somebody who says, "We're going to invest in you." So they've got a partnership with somebody. That might be Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy. They might wind up trying to partnership something with that. And there's a lot of ties in there that make sense with that. If they can do that, De La Hoya supposedly has a $350 million war chest that they can go in and they can do something with. They've got Canelo now. So, they've got some things happening. They have Chuck and Cheeto. I'm just saying, that really looks like their only shot is to partnership up with somebody, make the move that everyone else is making as far as technology is concerned, and to try and jump forward. But the one thing that Devin has said over and over again, and I think we've talked about it before, Miguel, is that until they've got somebody on the ground going into gyms and signing young stud fighters that no one's seen before, bringing them out and putting them in the cage and taking a shot at them and paying them really good money and signing them to 2-fight deals, they don't have anything. And I don't understand it, because they have huge production. I mean, when you look at the fight, it's like, man, the entrance is amazing. It's everything that you see in the WWE, even better maybe. But it's like going to a Kiss concert.
They're a made-for-TV show. That's what you're watching. When Bellator first with Spike by contract, and then I think Viacom or some big company like that owns them now. They are firmly TV material. That's why they don't pay-per-views and stuff like that. That's what they're looked at. So
I don't get it.
If some executive says, well, let's not do any fights this summer, then, maybe we don't see Bellator from July to November. You know what I mean? And you can't have a sport that's tied to like an external force like that drives everything.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense when Viacom owns them. Viacom's what, $3 billion?
Yeah, but put it this way, Viacom owns it, but they're built a big business with a million other things. Bellator's just a piece. It's not like all of a sudden they have, let's take all Viacom's money and throw it into fighting. That's never going to happen, right? So it just means they have a big force, and maybe they would have something that they have to impress. Their viewership numbers aren't all that great. At some point with a company like that, maybe that is going to show up and bite them in the butt. But again, if they're pulling in money on advertising and there's a balance there and nobody's losing out, they'll probably coast for a little while, but I don't see any improvement. And one, like I said, they're just so far out of the market, and they have ramped up and done a lot of shows lately. I think that's what you saw, in the early days with some of the other events, was that a lot got stalled when you had to go to weekly shows because you got to invest. You're going to lose money for a bit. And the UFC did for a bit until they had all their outlets in place. And
well, listen, guys, we burn out about as much time as we can take on this one. I'd love to talk more about it because, like, one of these days we're going to talk about Mars, which was an awesome show that happened and just never got its legs underneath it. Devin, anything you want to say about Bellator before we stop and we jump to the next thing?
No, I'll just finish with saying they need to invest more into more Aaron Picos and less trying to bring in Tito Ortiz to fight and Rampage Jacksons and Beverly Silvas. Push that out and develop this new talent, and they'll be doing better.
Hey, thanks for listening tonight. We are signing off for this one. Namaste. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. We appreciate everything you guys do. Let us know how we're doing. If you like what we're doing, tell other people. If you don't like what we're doing, tell us.
Today is repeat the question 4 times and ask me, is it tea? Is it tea? Also, if you're coming to Walmart, people in Kokomo, the line starts in produce. Good luck with that. I'm so out of here so soon. I can't wait. Happy New Year.